Hello, my name is John Chodacki, and welcome to this Fireside chat today as part of the Open Publishing Fest. Open Publishing Fest is a collaborative event, crowdsourced different discussions and demos and content around open publishing and the publishing world. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Catherine Stihler, CEO of Creative Commons. So thank you very much for taking the time and chatting with me today, Catherine. So
really great to be with you, John. Thanks for inviting me.
So maybe we could just jump right in and just say, what is it? What do you do on a day-to-day when you're, running an organization that everybody knows about Creative Commons, but the day-to-day of how it works and what goes into running that kind of organization? Maybe you could just walk through some of that for the viewers.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is there's no day is quite the same, and when you're managing a global team and working across time zones, but I think the most important thing is what underpins what we're doing, and with our new strategy, that's all about better sharing. And so thinking about that on a day-to-day basis and thinking how our work is enabling that, and also trying to think about our values, which are around agile leadership, global inclusivity, and informed intention. And so really trying to make sure that we're not just, talking the talk, that we're walking the walk in terms of what we're doing. So thinking about our programmatic work in open education and in open GLAM, thinking about responsibility around the licenses, which we're celebrating 20 years of, the license, the 20 years since the creation of Creative Commons. Next year's 20 years of the licenses, and that responsibility around our legal stewardship. And then our community, we have a global community. We had 91 countries represented at our most recent global summit. So that global inclusivity, that global community that comes around and together in that in the importance of open knowledge and open culture, and how we share open knowledge and culture for everyone everywhere. So, there's a lot to be done and a lot to do in terms of how we support our team, how we support our community, and how we support what we want to see in the world in terms of opening knowledge and culture for everyone everywhere.
Yeah, and I know you and I met, I think, venues. We were both on the advisory group for Open Citations.
Yes.
Work at Knowledge Foundation prior to Creative Commons. And I've worked with colleagues of yours on organizing CSV Conf.
Yeah.
But maybe just for the audience, a little bit about your journey, your professional and personal journey on how you got to this role.
Where to begin, John? Maybe I could start. One of the things when we were before coming on, I was just thinking about my journey into kind of the open movement and openness more generally. I think it really started when I got involved in a freedom of information request, which was to do with in my previous role, when I spent 20 years in the European Parliament as a Scottish member of the European Parliament. And I think it was the then First Minister had made a claim about legal advice they had: if Scotland become independent, we would be automatically members of the European Union. I knew that was not true. And so I started to ask questions. I asked if I could get the legal advice. They said no. I went to the Information Commissioner. The Information Commissioner eventually ruled that I wouldn't get the legal advice, but I would get to the answer whether legal advice existed or didn't. And all of that, and eventually it led to the fact that the legal advice didn't exist, and it led to questions around trust in government, and so all this rigmarole led me to really try and think about open accountability, both of those who are in government, but also about what that means for the public. And so I got involved in that kind of open freedom of information, which led me to think about, other things like making sure that that libraries have ebook access. So I ran a campaign about it was actually called Open Knowledge, and through all of those kind of experiences of the importance of openness, transparency, accountability, but also about thinking about digital within this. I was vice chair of the Internal Market Committee of the European Parliament, and I was given the responsibility of copyright. And there was a whole copyright debate going on in the European Union, and I got more and more and more involved in copyright, looking at it from a perspective of reform, of the fact that we need balanced copyright. And I was seeing, and sadly, a lot of what came out in the end of the European copyright decision making was not balanced in the way that I would have liked it to be. And so that kind of injustice, that thing about that balance, that being able to that access to knowledge part led me more and more into, as I say, into open. And so when Brexit happened, and I was thinking about the future, it was a natural, trajectory for me to kind of go into firstly the Open Knowledge Foundation, and then now into this wonderful role I have, and it's such an honour and privilege to lead Creative Commons. So I give you that background, which is probably kind of a long one, but it's one where I think my values, which have come out of my political experience, have led me into the open movement. And I feel that now I'm able to really try and press for that real importance of open knowledge and culture, and how we do that effectively. And clearly still copyright is an issue, and that's where Creative Commons with our licenses has proved to be such an effective organisation to be able to challenge that all rights reserved copyright to some rights reserved, and opening up knowledge and culture across our world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you were growing up, is this what you had always dreamed that you would one day grow up?
Well, John, I come from Wishaw in North Lanarkshire, and I don't think I remember at high school doing Scott Beck modules in computer. It was actually BBC Basic at the time, and little did I ever think. And I think Mr. Brown was the maths / computer teacher at the school, the only one. I think there was maybe 4 computers in the school. But it was, little did I ever think growing up and, in Wishaw, going to Coltness High School, that I'd be running a global not-for-profit. And I'm very proud of my roots, because, growing up in North Lanarkshire, the value of education, my parents were teachers. My grandmother and her sister had to leave school because they didn't have money. They were highly intelligent people, but didn't get the chance to go to university. My dad was the first in his family to go to university. And so it was really instilled in me that, education is emancipation, and access to knowledge is important. Knowledge is power. And so that was really something that was very important to me. And so getting the chance to go to university at St Andrews and being exposed to different things, but also the fact that I was brought up in a household that was really thinking about other people. My dad was a trade unionist, and really kind of embedded in the kind of the teaching union, and that gave me kind of ideas about how service and representation, and although my nobody in my family had ever been an elected politician, to go from Wishaw to St Andrews and then represent the youth movement of the Labour Party at a time just before the 97 general election was an amazing experience, to look at how knowledge and education, and I remember the slogan in the 97 election, I was the youngest candidate for the Labour Party in the 97 general election, was education, education, education. That, it's maybe not a surprise that I end up in an organisation, however many decades later, who also has a central part to it about the importance of education and why education matters, and why open education and open resources matter. But no, I think a lot about my old high school, and trying to encourage people from my old high school to think big and think differently, and if I can do it, then they can too. So yeah.
I talk to my nieces and nephews and stuff, and I talk about like what I do for a living, and they say,
yeah.
get into that? Like, how do you even find that
Sure.
role? And I'm like, it is really about like this combination of like passion and curiosity, but also what you're talking about, like social justice and just
Yeah.
thinking through what kind of problems are you wanting to help solve. And it just kind of like this, there's a lot of opportunistic moments and along the way, but it's kind of many people at the beginning think like, oh wow, there must be a plan. I must, if you follow certain steps, then you're just gonna one day end up in, leading
Yeah.
Creative Commons. Like, no, it's a little bit more about like personality, opportunity, passion, social, the justice movements, and it's a
Yeah.
little bit more of a mixture of all of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I kind of always reflect on why I always I always knew I was an internationalist because I always thought globally, yes, like all politics is local, absolutely, but thinking about that global and local and thinking how those connect. And it was a story actually. I was at, I think I was talking to you before. This time last Thursday, I was at COP, which was in Glasgow, and thinking about sustainability and all our responsibility around that, and internationalism around that. But it was in a conversation I was having about, well, why did you end up being international? How did that happen? And my dad actually was part of a trip when he was a student, which they went on a bus from Glasgow University to India. I mean, how you went from Glasgow to India by bus, and they did, and that story, that journey, that being part of something bigger, thinking differently, was always part of my childhood growing up in Wishaw, and so it that and then my dad got caught up in the war in 1965 when the bus was sold and they had to fly them out, and all of this, but that's a different story. But that sense of thinking about, it's not just where you are in that community, it's thinking about that bigger picture. And I think that's something which my family certainly gave me. And now running an organization which has that big picture about that opening knowledge and culture for everyone everywhere. And we were talking earlier, John, as well, that I'm moving from Scotland to California in the next few weeks. And I'll tell you a really funny story. But one of the removal men who was coming to move my stuff a couple of weeks ago, he came in and he was asking me what I was doing, and I told him that I was running Creative Commons, and he said, I know Creative Commons. I license my photographs with Creative Commons, and he said, I never thought the person that was running Creative Commons was living in Dunfermline in Scotland. And so I just thought there was something really touching
Mm.
about Simon, who was the removal man who was helping me, know about Creative Commons, know about what we were about, understood it, and then told the rest of the people that were helping remove all my stuff about why it was important. And that connection with Simon and others, and yes, there's more people we need to connect to for sure, but I just thought it was, of all the removal men to come and help me, it was somebody who understood the importance of why Creative Commons matters in
Yeah,
terms of his own photography. It was great. It was a really lovely moment.
yeah, and I mean, I think you earlier mentioned Creative Commons is celebrating its 20th anniversary.
Yes,
It's a
yes.
lot to accomplish in 20 years. Is to go
Oh,
nothing to name recognition and an understanding and a groundswell of like the people understanding the value of it to the point where people who are completely out of the sector can
yeah.
identify it and know it and understand its value. It's a huge accomplishment. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about what is planned for the 20th anniversary. Like you said, the organization as well as the licenses. So is there some
Yeah.
reflection or events or ideas that are coming out of that?
So we had our 20th anniversary global summit where I think I mentioned that we had 91 countries represented. It was incredible. And also, we had some incredible keynote speakers, amazing sessions, and I think that celebration, the feedback we got from that was just that this was the you know although it was still remote and all kind of online, and it was still an incredible moment, an incredible event, bringing those conversations that need to be had together. In terms of what we're planning, clearly, if we were more in person, we'd be, it's that balance at this particular sensitive time of what we can and cannot do, but and particularly around that value of global inclusivity, because we're just so aware that to be inclusive of our global community, we just have to be aware that that we still have challenges around how people can travel and vaccinations and all of those things. Those things said, we hope that next year we will be able to have to do maybe something different, but do some things in person, hopefully. And also we want to celebrate that 20 years of the licenses. So it's 20 years of our creation on the 19th of December, and you'll hopefully be sharing some of the wonderful messages of support and what we've achieved around that date. But also going into next year for the licenses, we want to be able to celebrate that moment too. So lots still to do, but we hope that 2022 will give us a little bit of freedom to do maybe something more personal. So let's see.
Yeah, I'm hopeful of that as well for other projects. It's time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Clearly, there's tons to be done. I mean, you were talking about
Yeah.
just the advocacy side of things, and
Yeah.
like looking to ensure that the communities that you're wanting to be influenced by the work of Creative Commons actually knows the value, understands it,
Yeah.
out there in the community. So what are the most important things in that sense of like ensuring that international? I mean, I'm sure you talk a lot about jurisdictions and government and regional laws and
Yeah.
structures. Like, how do you work? I mean, it's like such an amazing scale of like copyright in a like is a global, but it's a very local thing. So how do you work? I mean, like, what are the most important things when you're thinking about, hey, I'm trying to influence the whole world in its individual contexts? Like,
so I think at the moment we've been very much looking at our domains where we've got strength, and that is in our GLAM program, where we're thinking about opening up how collections are opening up and what that could look like, and thinking about underserved communities and thinking about different challenges that maybe we never thought about 20 years ago around the kind of ethical and in terms of privacy as well. But then when we think about our what we've been doing in terms of training and our certificates that we've been looking at in education with librarians, and now looking at that galleries, libraries, archives and museums. In fact, we're also been doing some work to think about how can we help journalists learn about Creative Commons, particularly as we're kind of in this, the misinformation, disinformation, all of those things that have been happening. To how can Creative Commons help free up knowledge to be able to inform debate and discussion? And then there's the broader debate that's going on around open societies more generally. We saw in the G7 that the debate around how can we support open society. I think Creative Commons has a part to play with that too, in terms of how we open up knowledge and culture to support our societies, to support communities, and to support democracy. And and that is a bit bigger picture, but it's also important that we're part of those conversations too. So I think how we move forward, yes, we've got work to do, because we might have freed up 2 billion pieces of content in our 20 years, but we also want to be able to make sure that we're opening up even more and doing that and that's why our theme is round about better sharing, and thinking about how we can do that better. What does that look like, and how can we achieve that within those values I mentioned right at the beginning of agile leadership, of informed intention, and of global inclusivity? And so that is kind of how we're trying to develop and move what is ours to do for the next 20 years. And we have this responsibility for the licenses that exist, because that's what underpins so much of the open web, and that is ours to do. But as we kind of think forward, celebrate the 20 years of the past, and that is amazing, but think forward for the next 20 years, we know that we want to see a better internet. We know we want to see a more democratic open space where there is more sharing in terms of that pro-social public interest, public good. And we see Creative Commons having a central place and space in those debates, discussions, but also, we are a public interest technology. And so that responsibility around that too is really important in the debates that are going on about how we can support the public interest in an environment where we see so much of the web being, private spaces, not those public, sharing spaces that are generative and are of the public, are for the public interest. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's
no,
some thoughts.
a lot of questions and ideas. I mean, I
Yeah,
wouldn't consider myself an expert or anything, but just the within this kind of open knowledge, open web
yeah,
world, we talk a lot about trying to leverage Creative Commons and the licenses
yes,
to put a stake in the ground. And there's
yeah,
this, like with any situation, there are like the people who understand the nuances,
yeah,
or do, and are having a conversation at that nuanced level of saying like, what are the restrictions that come into place when we actually do want, we act like we want to have more permissiveness, like, the share alike and non-commercial stuff can actually end up being somewhat of a trap to, when you get to the nuances of like truly open information. And then
so,
that nuance tied with like just talking to new people who, when they jump,
yes,
they're like, oh my God, it's so great. There's non-commercial and there's share alike. And you're like, but yes, but can it's hard to juggle between
yeah,
advocacy and information and how
yeah,
to people even learn, and the nuances of like where the whole community could go in the future.
yeah. And I think, it was interesting. We looked at who attended our global summit recently, and I think it was around about 40% of people who attend were first time, new people to. Now that's encouraging, because it is ours to do to make sure that the movement, the community are not just supported, but we grow, we renew, we support. And so that, this balancing you describe between, those that are really knowledgeable, you could say the ones who are converted already, and the people that we need to bring on the journey, and
Yeah.
and we need to have, something for, all of those individuals. So when we think about sometimes what is ours to do, it's almost like it's a continuum. We need to bring people on the journey, and Alice and my team talks about the ladder of engagement. And it's true, you have to have a ladder of engagement to not just keep those who are passionate, who are committed, who are key advocates, but we have to create advocates for the future as well, and bring people along on that journey with us. And I would really love to see more people knowing about Creative Commons, understanding about what it is and what we do, why it's important, whether it's in their day-to-day work, or whether it's with what they're interested in terms of creativity and all of those things. But I think that a key part of our purpose is to nurture, support, bring people along, support those who already understand, and ensure that Creative Commons is, we are the global standard when it comes to, open licensing and the open web, but we need more people to come on that journey with us. And I think that is ours to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it looks like, we're running a little bit out of
Oh,
time, but
I'm
just,
sorry.
are there any parting thoughts or words of wisdom or anything you would want to leave us with today?
I think that strategic endeavour of better sharing is something I would like to leave people with, and also to get people listening today, your thoughts, your ideas, contribution. Please, keep in touch and keep in contact with us. But that aspect of what we are doing about what better sharing looks like and what is ours to do in the world of today is really important if we want the web that we want, which is in the public interest. And that is something at Creative Commons we're really reflecting on and thinking about, really better sharing for a better internet.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, Creative Commons is such the core infrastructure of so much of what the open movements are doing. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing and everybody there. So, and thank you for
Thanks.
taking the time to speak with me again today. And everybody listening, please check out the Open Publishing Fest website. There's a lot of other interesting talks and fireside chats happening throughout the week, and appreciate you taking the time to view the stream. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, John.